the founder and creator of Pro Football Talk and PFT Live, and also the author of Playmakers, where all books are still available. For that, for you to read, is none other than Mike Florio back here on the show on the Mercedes-Benz Vans phone line. How you doing, Mike?
Doing great, Rich. How are you, pal?
I am doing fine. So what's your read of the Murray contract and take on it from that?
It's far worse than the Deshaun Watson deal, even though it was presented as better. $46.1 million, new money average. Deshaun Watson got $46 million, but that's only part of the story. Kyler Murray signed for 7 years. The 5-year extension gets added to the 2 years I already had. He's going to make under $38 million per year. Not that we need to have a bake sale for him, but when we're talking about comparing these contracts, that's far short of Deshaun Watson. And again, he's tied up for 7 years. And he only has $100 million, again, only. We should all be so underpaid. $100 million in fully guaranteed money, where Watson has $230 million. So Watson's deal much better. Watson was in a much better circumstance to get the Browns to put the money on the table that he did. He had 4 teams chasing him. Kyler Murray was under contract for 2 more years with 2 franchise tags after that. So he did the best deal that he could under his circumstances. And, Rich, it dawned on me this morning, I think what happened with Baker Mayfield, his very close friend and former Oklahoma teammate in Cleveland last year, I think at the end of the day, that probably got Kyler Murray to take the deal, because Baker Mayfield didn't take the best deal that the Browns would have given last year. In week 2, shoulder injury, his career goes haywire, and now he's just trying to hang on and win the starting job in Carolina. Kyler Murray sees that, I believe, and says, I'm taking the certainty, even though some of these basic factors pale in comparison to what Deshaun Watson got.
So Arizona held the line, and by that I mean they were the first organization up after Watson signed his fully guaranteed deal, and thus the Cardinals did not fully guarantee their deal, and that I think is something that I'm sure the other member clubs of the National Football League are pleased to hear. Does that mean they're free and clear, the rest of the teams, that the Cardinals just kind of reset and recalibrated things on that level? What is your sense on that?
Well, I guarantee you the Ravens and owner Steve Bisciotti, who was one of the owners who spoke out about the Watson deal at the league meetings in March, will take that position. And I said last year when Josh Allen got his contract, Lamar Jackson should want that deal. When Deshaun Watson got his contract, Lamar Jackson should want that deal. Now that Murray's deal is done, the Ravens should want Jackson to take that same deal with maybe a little bit more thrown on top of it, because it's only $100 million fully guaranteed. Here's the practical difference, and here's why I think the Cardinals didn't do it. I don't think that Michael Bidwell has the ability to put $169 million into escrow by March 31 of next year, which is what Jimmy Haslam has to do on the Watson contract. The way it works out, I had someone explain it to me at the time. $230 million fully guaranteed, contract signed this year. By March 31 of next year, $169 million had to be put in escrow. Some teams aren't going to have the cash on hand to do it. They've got the cash flow to pay the guy year in and year out, and the funding rule is in place to protect players against teams that may go out of business. Nobody's going out of business, not today. Maybe 50 years ago, but not today. The TV money is going to pay these contracts that the players are due. So you're going to have some teams that can afford to fully guarantee because of this stupid funding rule that is grossly outdated, and some teams just can't. I suspect that Michael Bidwell can't, or at a minimum won't, put $169 million in escrow, and that's relevant to Joe Burrow in Cincinnati, because if any owner isn't going to be willing or able to put a gigantic ton of money into an escrow account, it's Mike Brown, who has run the Bengals for decades. So that is where there's going to be a disconnect. So it creates an advantage for the teams that have the money if you're competing for free agents and you can fully guarantee a deal, because some teams just aren't going to be able to do it. And I think that's the trend to watch going forward.
We were talking about it just moments ago, Mike, is that it wasn't lost on us that the Bengals are finally talking about putting somebody else's name on the stadium other than Paul Brown's, and that they're selling some rights that they never thought or they never were interested in or never endeavored to sell. And that could possibly be them saying, I'm going to have to, Brown or the Brown family saying they're going to have to cut a check to escrow for Joe Burrow in the somewhat near future. And maybe they're making it's like a capital raise that they're doing right now. What do you think?
I think that makes a lot of sense, Rich. It's been a point of contention for years. Prior to the 2011 CBA, which came after an extended lockout, there were arguments among owners, and I heard a story about, and I assume it's been reported, that Jerry Jones and Mike Brown got into it because of the failure of Mike Brown to fully capitalize his team. And Jerry Jones said, I'll take those naming rights and I'll sell them in 5 minutes. Just an example of the way that Mike Brown wasn't maximizing his local revenue and living off of the shared revenue where he benefits from having a team like the Cowboys in the league that drives up the value of the TV deals. So I think that they're recognizing if we're going to keep Joe Burrow over the long term, if we're going to make him happy, if he's going to be satisfied here, we have to change the way we do things. And it's not just what we pay him, it's how we go about putting players around him. Now, they have yet to break from one of the most outdated practices in the league, which is refusing to guarantee money for veteran contracts other than quarterbacks beyond the first year. The Packers and the Bengals are the last two to hold the line there. The Bengals at some point are going to have to change that. They're going to have to do it with Jamar Chase, or they're going to have a hard time keeping him. That's the downside of having a great team. It's expensive to have a great team. It's expensive to hold a great team together. And I think there are teams out there, and I think historically the Bengals have been one of them, that look at it and say, we can still make a crap load of money. We can make a lot of profit by just kind of going through the motions and aspiring to be middle of the pack. Wins and losses go a long way toward determining a value of a team. Money in the bank is the ultimate determining factor. And the Bengals have been doing as well as anyone because they're sharing that massive money that comes through the league's coffers. So I think that this is a tangible sign that they recognize if they're going to hold this team together now with Joe Burrow, they really do have to approach it more like a business than they ever have.
Friend of the program, Mike Florio, here on the Rich Eisen Show, Peacock's PFT Live, kicking off NBC Sports on Peacock every day. To Dan Patrick, to this right here program, to this current conversation. So what is the scoop with James Garoppolo? Didn't they kind of give him an opportunity to seek a trade back in March? Would they just refresh it? They hit refresh on the offer to let him find his new spot?
It reminds me of when George told Sienna, the woman named after a crayon, that he loved her the second time. And she said, I heard you the first time. Because this wasn't news. And look, I'm not going to get into the whole sausage-making process in this setting. But there's a lot of favor trading that happens. There's a lot of stuff that happens for reasons other than it's really news. And sometimes old news gets repackaged as new news to maybe pull the ripcord on a lawnmower that still hasn't started yet. Garoppolo's been available for months. So this week's news reminds everyone that Garoppolo is still available. And I think the big takeaway is nobody wants him, especially not for anything close to $25 million, which is what he's due to make this year, or whatever the 49ers are going to want in trade. Good luck getting any real value when Baker Mayfield got a fifth-round pick for the Browns, who still have to pay him $10.5 million, and the Panthers are only paying him $5 million. That's the ceiling on Garoppolo, and that's not going to be good news for the 49ers. So I think that they're going to have a hard time placing him. I still have a weird gut feeling about the Texans. Nick Caserio, the GM there, drafted Jimmy Garoppolo in 2014. And if Caserio really does want him, this is the way you play it. You slow play it. You act like you're all in with Davis Mills, and you just wait for the opportunity to buy low. And so I wouldn't expect there to be any indication that they want to do it, but it wouldn't surprise me if they do it, because I think Garoppolo is good enough to take a 4-win team and make them a 8-9-win team if they really want to do that, if they're not doing the full season, let's position ourselves to get a franchise quarterback next year game. But I could see him in Houston, but there really isn't any place out there, and there hasn't been a place out there that we look at and say, I got a feeling he's going to end up there. We knew for 2 months that Baker Mayfield had a good chance to go to Carolina. There hasn't been a single team that we've looked at and said, I think that's where Jimmy G is going to go.
I'm thinking Seattle if he's released. How do we get this? What's the scenario under which he's released? How does that happen?
Well, and here's the problem. because at some level I think the 49ers decide, and they think that Garoppolo will go along with it. You know, the talking points from the 49ers that we've heard all offseason, oh, he's a great guy, he's a nice guy, Jimmy's a nice guy, Jimmy's a nice guy. At some point, Jimmy's got to be a butthole. I almost said the other word. You know, you can say the two words apart, but you can't say them
yes,
together. You ever
that's
think
true.
that? You can say ass, right? And you can say hole.
You can.
But God forbid you say them together.
Well, I appreciate, just for our sake, for this moment, that you separated the two there.
That's right. And I almost went the other way. But what was I saying? Oh,
yes, Jimmy the Butthole.
Jimmy needs to go butthole. Jimmy needs to be that needs to be his mafia nickname, Jimmy the Butthole Garoppolo. That's what he needs to be, because otherwise, here's what the 49ers are going to do. They're just going to squat on him, and they're going to wait for something that you can't expect to have happen. A Teddy Bridgewater injury is a rarity.
Yes.
Non-contact, and we rarely see starters play in the preseason anymore with the 3 games. So lightning striking and taking out a starting quarterback and all of a sudden opening up an opportunity to get a first-round pick for Garoppolo, and Garoppolo gets his $25 million, that's not going to happen. So I think what occurs is we get to late August, early September, time to set the roster. Week 1 is when Garoppolo's $24 million salary becomes fully guaranteed if he's still on the team. At some point before then, they're going to go to him, I think, and say, hey, Jimmy, I mean, we'll keep you as the backup to Trey Lance, but we can't pay you $25 million. And then what does he do? He's screwed at that point because everybody else has a depth chart that's set. And what do we hear when a quarterback gets injured? We hear we're going to go next man up, next man up, next man up. So I don't know that Garoppolo is so good that he just swoops in anywhere like Brett Favre with the Vikings in 2009, gets up to speed, and turns the team into a winner right away. Too many questions, too many injuries in his history. He doesn't stand out as a top 5 guy. I think he's going to have a hard time. This may just be a lost season. This may be about just doing whatever you can and trying to position yourself to make a good decision in free agency in 2023.
Mike Florio here on the Rich Eisen Show. What's going on, best you can tell, in New Orleans? A PUP list designation, it seems, to start things off for Michael Thomas. Thought maybe an ankle injury, he'd be able to just come back and go. Alvin Kamara, what happened at the Pro Bowl? Where does that all stand for a team that does have Dennis Allen? And is Jameis going to be ready? I mean, this team could be a team with certainly a defense. We had Malcolm Jenkins yesterday doing its usual thing on Tampa, and Brady having a shot maybe at the division. You never know, or completely different. What can you tell me about the Saints?
NFC playoff field wide open beyond the Rams and the Bucks and the Packers. I think those 4 spots up for grab. Now we know the NFC East is going to get one of them, but the wild card spot's wide open. The Saints could be one of them, or the Saints could fall apart. The Michael Thomas thing, I think he's going to be with the Saints this year. They redid his contract as part of their annual effort to spin straw into salary cap space, and Mickey Loomis is really good at that. But when they redid Thomas's deal, that guaranteed he's going to be part of that team. The question is, when's he finally going to be able to play after an ankle injury that he suffered in garbage time against the Bucs in Week 1 of the 2020 season? Jameis coming back from the torn ACL, they seem to be all in with him. You know, that was a team I was kind of watching for Baker Mayfield and maybe even for Jimmy G, because they were in the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes before they re-signed Jameis Winston. Alvin Kamara, I think paid leave is a possibility for him. That doesn't get discussed very often. He's facing felony battery charges. He falls into the category of allegations that can get a guy put on paid leave. He's got a hearing coming up in August. No indication that the charges against him are going to be resolved before the season starts. The Saints are bracing for a 6-game suspension minimum at some point. But before we even get to that, if these criminal charges are pending and the NFL doesn't like to take action until the criminal case is over, he could end up on paid leave. That's something to keep an eye on. So things can go a lot of different ways for the Saints this year. They could be really, really good, or it could all just fall apart. And they're going to be one of the more fascinating stories to watch. Because, 4-0 against the Buccaneers in the regular season with Tom Brady over the last 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, that's a team in a scenario that just doesn't get much run and not a lot of conversation. You could make a case that Sean Payton's future gets more run than some of what's being discussed about the Saints. And what his He's gonna have an interesting year, Sean, right? I mean, there's some teams that came out that are apparently associated on his wish list, and there's some established coaches in those places.
Well, he made the comment to Jarrett Bell the other day that there'll be, 6 openings or so, and then that's when you have an idea of how things are going to go. Here's the reality. Sometime after Halloween, close to Thanksgiving, the bad teams are going to know who they are, and the owners who are ready to make a change are going to be thinking, how do I upgrade? And I know this flies in the face of multiple NFL rules, tampering rule, Rooney rule. They don't want teams, number one, they don't want owners to know who they're going to hire before they even fire the guy that they have. And number two, they don't want teams to be talking to people who are under contract with other organizations in a way that doesn't mesh with the rules. And the rules are that you have to approach the Saints and work out a deal with the Saints for permission to even talk to Payton. And once you work out a deal with the Saints for compensation, then you're allowed to talk to Payton. But the reality is, the way things really work, somebody's going to reach out to Payton through back channels, intermediaries, before the end of the season. Somebody's going to know what Payton wants to be the coach, what the Saints want by way of compensation. Everybody will keep their mouth shut. Otherwise, you end up on the radar screen and you get charged with violations of multiple rules. And then it all starts to play out after the season ends. Somebody's going to get fired. They're going to go through a search, and then we're going to hear, the Saints are talking to insert name of team for possible permission to negotiate with Sean Payton. By the time we hear that, the deal will already have been done.
The deal will already have been done.
And watch Dallas. I know Jerry Jones does not want us to pay attention. Playmakers, one of the chapters, talks about how Payton was a done deal in Dallas. It was going to happen. They just needed to activate the process, which would have been, number one, fire Jason Garrett, number two, do your search, and then number three, go to the Saints and do a deal for Payton. That was going to happen. I don't know if we talked about it on your show before, but that was the Anthony Davis wrinkle when he was playing for the Pelicans and Mickey Loomis was the head of the basketball operations there. Mm-hmm. Davis, January 28 of 2019, makes it known he wants out, and that's when the Saints decided, and Loomis specifically decided, I can't be the guy who's responsible for both Davis and Sean Payton leaving, or Payton would have been the coach of the Cowboys in 2019. And earlier this year, if Brian Flores doesn't file his lawsuit, Payton would have been the coach of the Miami Dolphins. And all of it is set up behind the scenes before we ever even know it's a possibility.
Wow. Damn. That's Mike Florio here on the Rich Eisen Show. What's one thing that's on your radar screen that I haven't asked you about?
Oh, we have entered the Friday afternoon summertime bad news dump window.
So that's
Deshaun Watson ruling.
That's it?
I'm on Deshaun Watson watch all afternoon. If Judge Sue Robinson is on board with the NFL's preferred approach, and look, what did we get last Friday afternoon? Texans settle 30 claims.
Yeah.
Right? By Monday morning, we've all moved on. I mean, there's value in it. Even though we're all tied into Twitter all the time, there's value in having it dumped now because by Monday there's other stuff to talk about. It's not going to be as intense. I'm watching because I think next week is the real window. But if she's on board with the way the NFL likes to get that news out there, it's coming this afternoon between now and 5 o'clock.
But it really wasn't 30 claims against the Texans, right? Did the Texans have to, do that? That's the one thing that I found interesting about that announcement last week was there was only one individual who made a claim against the Texans, actually named the Texans, if I'm not mistaken.
You're right. There was one lawsuit. But the universe of people who could have made claims against the Texans was 29 others.
And they knew that, but where did they find that? Is there a website?
Represents all of them. So these are all pre-lawsuit settlements. And look, they didn't even have it. I hadn't thought of this until you brought it up.
Okay.
They didn't have to tell us about the other 29. That's one of the benefits of settling a case before it's ever filed. You never even tell anyone. No one ever finds out. All we had to know was the one case against the Texans was settled. The fact that they put out there that they did all 30, that to me is surprising because if I'm the Texans, I don't know that I want to admit that I've written a check to 30 different people who accused me of wrongdoing in connection with Deshaun Watson, but my only guess could be that they decided they want everybody to know that their role in this is over. So it's not just we settled one and we're going to sit back and wonder whether or not number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, and so on will be coming. Everyone knows we're out. It's done. Quit asking us about it. Quit talking about it. We're finally and fully moving on from Deshaun Watson.
Well, I mean, they said in their statement this is not an admission of any wrongdoing, but instead a clear stand against any form of sexual assault and misconduct. I mean, parse that one for me, Counselor.
Every civil lawsuit that gets settled either before or after the complaint is filed contains language saying there's no admission of wrongdoing. Deshaun Watson testified that their director of security, when he became aware that there was a woman who was suggesting she could expose Deshaun Watson on social media, instead of figuring out exactly what's going on, asking all the right questions, giving him all the right advice on how to change behaviors that could lead to those types of allegations, he just gave him an NDA to use, non-disclosure agreement. Here, you're going to go get these massages, have them sign this, then they can't go on social media and make threats about you. So I think that there needs to be a closer look at what the director of security did, what he knew, what he should have known. And this gets back to the double standard that we see sometimes between the way the league treats players and non-players. The league won't respond to the question of whether or not they investigated the Texans for personal conduct policy violations. The Texans won't respond. But at the end of the day, they settled 30 potential lawsuits, 1 actual and 29 potential lawsuits based upon allegations of their misconduct. And if you're going to potentially run Deshaun Watson out of the league for a year, if that's what you're looking for, how do you not even look into whether or not somebody with the Texans should be punished under that same policy?
Well, I'm kind of also looking at it different. Is this something that Sue Robinson can take into account, or everything was the hay, if you will, was already in the barn and there's nothing else? So she's just the documents and the testimony on which she can rule, that's already done. Nothing like this could be added to the equation, where one of the 32 teams in the NFL says that they're taking a stand against any form of sexual assault and misconduct. I mean, isn't that basically saying they think Deshaun Watson did it?
Well, if I'm representing Deshaun Watson, the thought process I go through, and it's a tough decision. There's no calculator that you can punch the numbers into and get the right answer. Mm-hmm. When you catch wind of the Texans settling these cases, you ask yourself, should we send a letter to Judge Robinson explaining this new information, asking her to consider it, asking whether or not there will be an appropriate investigation here? And if there is not going to be an appropriate investigation, then that is relevant to whether or not the punishment of Deshaun Watson should go forward. The other side of it is sometimes if you fire that cannon, you end up pissing off the judge and you complicate your life and you get smacked down. That's really the analysis. Is what I'm about to do something that's going to piss off the judge in a way that potentially affects me? And lawyer, even though I don't know that many judges get mad at a lawyer and then look at the case more skeptically, but the lawyers definitely are worried about it. So there must be something to this notion of tiptoeing on eggshells and making very, very careful strategic decisions. But I would at least consider making sure she knows that the Texans have paid out these settlements, and what the league does about the Texans' behavior or the allegations against the Texans under the personal conduct policy is a relevant consideration for what a fair outcome is for Deshaun Watson.
Enjoy your last weekend without all 32 teams being active for the rest of the calendar year.
Thank you, Rich.
Take care, man. That's Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk.